Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Calm and Calculated, What Key Financial Tools Can Help You Achieve Success on Your Farm. I'm Ellen Crane, the Extension Coordinator for the Beef Cattle Research Council, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. This session will last for approximately 1 hour, but may go longer depending on the number of questions you've got for us later on during the question and answer period. If you're on Twitter, tweet along with us using the hashtag BeefWebinar. We are recording this session, and I will email out the link of the recording to everyone that registered in a couple of days. So if you miss anything tonight and want to watch it again later, you can. Of course, you'll be able to hear and see tonight's presenters, but we can't hear or see you. If you want to communicate with us, you can type into the chat window on the control panel or into the Q&A box on the control panel. If you have a question or comment for me or either of the presenters, that's the place to do so. And feel free to send questions in at any time. We will answer all of your questions at the end of the hour. If your internet connection is a bit slow tonight, it might help to close other programs that are using the internet, as well as closing the webcam window, which means that you won't be able to see us, but hopefully our voices will come through more clearly. This is what we'll be covering tonight. You are going to hear from 3 speakers on the webinar this evening. They will be talking about financial tools and having a good relationship with your creditor. So with that, let's get started. I am pleased to welcome our first speaker for tonight. Brett McRae is a young producer that farms 12 miles southwest of Brenna, Manitoba. He runs a mixed operation, including purebred Angus cattle, cereal grains, canola, forage seed, and a diverse annual forage crops. He is an innovator in soil health, cover crops, and low maintenance livestock. Brett was a 2014-2015 Cattlemen's Young Leader graduate. He currently serves as a Manitoba beef producer delegate, and he is past president of the Young Cattlemen's Council. Brett is also a current mentor for the BCRC Researcher Mentorship Program. So tonight, Brett will be speaking about gross margin ratios, a financial tool that he uses for decision-making on his operation. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Brett.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen now and we'll get into this.
Perfect.
Okay, do you see my screen?
I do. Looks good.
Okay, thanks, Ellen, and thank you, BCRC, for inviting me to be part of this webinar. It's quite an honor. I hope I can provide some value for you guys that you can use on your ranch and find this helpful. So we're going to talk about economic or gross margin analysis tonight. Most of what I've learned here, I've learned at either the Ranching for Profit School or the Year-Round Grazing System School, which is Steve Kenyon or Greener Pasture Ranching's school. Both of those programs I would highly recommend, and you can get more information about this from them. So we're going to talk about gross margin analysis tonight. I'm going to talk about the economic side, which answers the question, does this make money? Melissa's going to get more into the finance side of, can I afford it? So first we're going to look at, okay, does this enterprise make money? And if it does, now we go to Melissa and say, okay, how do I afford to do this? So that's how it's going to mostly work out. When we're talking about economics, we're going to talk about the value more so than the price or the cost. And I think that'll make more sense as we get into the spreadsheet. What we're looking at tonight is gross margin per unit. So that's the gross margin per the unit, which in this example is going to be a cow-calf enterprise, so gross margin per cow. When I say gross margin, what that means is the gross product, so the value that your enterprise produces minus the direct costs gives you the gross margin. If you take the gross margin of each enterprise on your ranch and take away your overhead costs, that should leave you with your overall profit and hopefully not a loss. When we're talking direct costs, a direct cost is something where one more cow means one more unit of cost. So a couple examples of this, One would be vaccines. If you have one more cow, you need one more dose of vaccines. If you have 10 more cows, you need 10 more doses. Hay would be another one. If you have one more cow, you need one more bale or one more unit of hay. Things like tractors or hired men. If you have one more cow, you don't necessarily need one more tractor or one more hired man. Those are all overhead costs. And how we're going to break this down tonight is that everything else is an overhead cost. If you don't have one more cow requires one more unit of cost, it's an overhead. The reason that I do this is that we're using the KISS method. Keep things simple. If it's simple, it'll get done. What I've found on my ranch, there's many very complicated and elaborate cost of production calculators and margin calculators out there. This one is one that I use. It's simple and it actually gets done. I found with those other ones, they were too complex, they took too much work, and it wasn't actually getting done. So we're going to go into our example ranch tonight. We're going to call this ranch BCRC Ranch. BCRC Ranch is a 100 cow operation. They buy all the replacements, and we're going to come back to that in a second. They have a 12% replacement rate, a 1% death loss on the cows. They sell all the calves at weaning or close to weaning. 95% of the calves are going to make it to weaning to be sold. They calve in April and they wean around October. So pretty typical of most Canadian ranches out there. Now, why are we buying all the replacements? A couple reasons. One, it makes the demonstration way more simple. And the big thing here, I always separate out the replacement heifer enterprise from the cow-calf enterprise. It makes things more simple to calculate, and probably more importantly is you find out where the money is being made, whether you're making more money on your replacement heifer enterprise or your cow-calf enterprise. Or maybe you're both are making money, or maybe both are losing money. This way you can see, and you can't lie to yourself by selling your calves to the replacement heifer enterprise and buying them back at fair market value. So let's get into it. This is a spreadsheet that I made while I was at Ranching for Profit. I made this up using their principles, but made it up myself. What we're going to do tonight, we're going to fill out the blue areas, and you'll see how this goes. So just follow the bouncing ball, basically. So we're going to start with the valuing our animals. So all the numbers that I put tonight are probably going to be wrong, but you'll get the idea as we go along. So we're going to assume that we can buy good bred heifers for $2,000. At the end of their life, they're worth $1,000 as a cull cow. We're going to buy some $4,000 bulls, and they're still worth $2,000 when we cull them. Our calves, we're going to sell for $1,000, and we don't have to worry about a cull price on the calves. So that's the value of the animals in our cow-calf operation. Now let's follow these columns down. So we're going to start with 100 cows, like we said. Unfortunately, one's going to die in the year. We're going to have to replace 12 of them. So that leaves us with, now these aren't sales, these are cull sales. We're going to sell 11 culls every year. So we end the year, our ending inventory, with 100 cows left over. Now with the bulls, we're going to assume that 3 bulls can cover those 100 cows. We live in a perfect world where no bulls die, but we're going to have to replace one and cull one. Now with the calves, we don't start with any beginning inventory on the calves, but we have 100 of them that are born. 5 of those little guys unfortunately die, and we were able to sell 95 of them. So you can see where we start the year at our beginning inventory. This is the number of animals that we have and the value of them. And you have the value for cows, bulls, and calves. And then the ending inventory and what it's worth in each class and what it's worth total. This gives us our gross product. Now, a key thing when I talked earlier about value, the key thing to notice here is the gross product is the value this business has produced, or this enterprise has produced over the year. So you will see that we've sold $95,000 worth of calves, along with about $13,000 worth of cull animals. So there's been $108,000 worth of sales, but we've had to do some purchases to replace those animals. So the economic value that this enterprise has produced is about $80,000 or $800 per cow. Just for example purposes, if we hadn't have sold those calves and we just kept them, we end the year with 95 calves, our gross product doesn't change because it's the same amount of value that that business has produced. So we'll just put that back. That's covers the majority of the gross product side for now. We'll come back to that in a bit. Now we're going to move down and talk about the cost side. So remember, direct costs are anything that one more cow means one more unit of cost. We're going to start with opportunity interest or opportunity cost. What opportunity cost is it's a measure of your management. It's the value of what your investment could be making elsewhere. So there's $212,000 of your money that you have tied up in this operation. That money could be doing something else for you. It could be invested, it could be in another enterprise, etc. There's many people that will use a 10% opportunity cost here. We're not going to be quite that aggressive tonight. We're going to start with 5%. How we're doing that is I'm assuming you can borrow money for less than 5%. What this is going to tell you that even if you have to pay 5% interest on the money you borrowed to start this enterprise from scratch, it's still going to work. So you can fluctuate this value to wherever you see fit, but it's one that you definitely don't want to overlook. Now, other costs that most of you will be more familiar with. Hay cost, obviously, we're going to assume that there's $240 to feed a cow for the year. I'm assuming that you're going to be $1.60 a day to bale graze these cows, and you're going to feed them for 150 days. Right, wrong, you get the idea for now. We're going to put a bag of mineral per year into these cows. We're going to assume that you bought some protein tubs for other supplements to extend your grazing season in the fall. There's about $20 worth of vet costs per cow, about $30 to market them, and about $1,000 to get your calves to the auction mart at the end of the year. Could there be other costs in here? Yeah, you could have AI or other costs associated with this, but for now, that gives us a good start. So that gives us our gross product. You take away your direct costs, and you're left with your gross margin, both on a per cow basis and as a total of the enterprise. Now, when I'm doing this, one of the most important numbers I look for here is what's called the gross margin ratio. The GMR is the gross margin ratio. What this is the ratio of what you start with as the gross product and what you're left with after you take your direct costs out. So this is a measure of how much costs there are related to how much value you produce. So what this is saying is that of your $80,000 of value you produced in this business, you're only left with 41% of it as the margin left over. The benchmark for this number is 70%. I consider anything over 60 to be good and 70 is ideal. So 41.8% is horrible. This is telling me that this business is in trouble, or at least this enterprise is in trouble. What you need to do to fix that, you either need to create more value, have less direct costs, or both, or it could be telling you that this enterprise is not suited to your situation. You'd be better to take that investment and put it in a different enterprise, maybe stockers or grassers or something better for your ranch. Maybe growing replacement heifers is something that's going to give you a better margin for your operation. And that you just have to do the numbers yourself to see where you're at. But it's a good benchmarking tool to see where you are. Now that covers most of this spreadsheet. You may have noticed that there's this curious little black hole here. In this black hole are the things that are often hidden costs. One of these would be death loss, which in some spreadsheets, you'll see it down here as a direct cost. The way mine works, it's up here in the gross product side. I just put it there so it's easy to see what the value is per cow. The big one and the big ugly one here is the cow depreciation. This is a real cost, and it's in a cow-calf operation. It's usually a big cost. You can see here that this is the second largest cost for our operation. And how we figure that out is we'll look on the bulls just because it's simpler. We had to replace one bull. We sold a $2,000 bull and replaced him with a $4,000 bull. So we had a $2,000 loss here. If you take that loss plus the loss of our cull sales on our cows and divide it over the entire herd, you end up with $150 per cow cost of cow depreciation. That's the second largest cost in this business. I'm a purebred cow-calf operator. In my business, that's the number one cost. It's a real thing, and it's something to really pay attention to. If you'd like more information about cow depreciation, go on YouTube. Dallas Mount has a YouTube presentation or webinar where he did a webinar with Maya Grazing, and he does an excellent job of explaining how cow depreciation works and what you can do to help it out. So that shows us, this is the same sheet all filled out with a little bit of explanation here. Now when you have this and you have all these numbers in front of you, now you have a tool that you can manipulate a bit to see how it affects your business and how we can make this number, the gross margin and the gross margin ratio, how we can make it better for our business. So maybe you look at your operation and you think, you know what, my vet bill's pretty high. Maybe we should try and cut that in half, or maybe we should, take some of that off of that. We can save some money on vaccines. Well, that's changed our margin a little bit, but it hasn't really done much. Versus, what if we could get another $100 for our calves? That changes the margin quite a bit. Now we're up to almost a 50% ratio, and we've had about a $10,000 increase in margin. That's a pretty big change. Another one you could look at is, what if we could cut our hay cost in half? That's made a humongous change to our operation, and it's really done, it's made a big change to the gross margin ratio and an impressive change to the gross margin as a whole. Obviously, some of these costs are going to have associated costs with them. If you have to have less hay, maybe you're going to have more supplements, and etc. You may look at this and think, man, 70%, that's huge. How do we get there? Well, I went from BCRC Ranch across the road to the neighbors, and let's look at Perfect World Ranch. Here's a ranch that does have an over 70% gross margin and has done some really aggressive things to make that happen. So we're going to assume here, now anything in green is something that's improved, and anything in yellow is something that is increased or be a cautionary, I guess. So we're assuming here that in Perfect World Ranch, they can get a premium for their calves. To do that, though, they've had to spend more money on their bulls. They've maybe went to My Farm, McRae Land and Livestock, of course, to get a premium bull, to sell a premium calf. I'm just kidding, but you can do that. So they've increased the value there, but they've also increased the cost. When you look at, we're going to come back to the cows in a minute. When they, on the hay side, they've cut their hay bill in half, but to do that, they've had to increase quite a bit of protein supplement, we're going to assume. So there's some differences. There's some increased costs and some decreased costs, but you have to weigh out the whole picture in order to do this. One of the big things that they've done here, we're just going to zoom in a bit, is you've noticed that their cow depreciation is negative. So they actually have a $220 appreciation per cow. How they're doing that is they're buying $2,000 bred heifers, and their entire 100 cows, they're buying 100 bred heifers per year, keeping them for the year, and then selling 84 of them at a premium at $2,500. So they're buying bred heifers and selling bred cows. Obviously, they still have some cull sales. Not all of them are going to get bred, but this is something that they've done. This is a pretty aggressive move, I think most people would say, but they've taken their cow depreciation and turned it around to cow appreciation. Something that obviously in this scenario has worked well. Is this the real world? Maybe, maybe not. But by using this tool, you can really see how all these things affect in your ranch. Just before we close up on this, if you look at this operation, this is an operation with a 70% gross margin ratio and almost $90,000 of margin on 100 cows. If you look at BCRC Ranch, they had a 41% ratio. They only had $33,000 per cow, or $33,000 of margin on 100 cows. They could double their numbers. They could get 200 cows. They're still not as good as this ranch that's really focused on creating more value, reining in their costs, and making the biggest margin that they could. So this the BCRC ranch could double their numbers and still not, and possibly double their work and not be as far ahead as these guys in the Perfect World Ranch. The Perfect World Ranch could now take this, they could double their numbers and be more than 4 times ahead of the ranch that didn't take time to use this spreadsheet to really see where the value is being created in their business. So with that, I think I've covered everything for tonight. We're just going to stop sharing. Please tell me I haven't been talking to myself for the last 20 minutes.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. It's a little unnerving when you have nobody talking back to you.
Oh, I know. Well, thank you so much for that, Brett. Again, if you have any questions for Brett, feel free to type those in now and we'll answer them all later. But our next presenter will be Melissa Reinhardt from Farm Credit Canada. Melissa grew up on a cow-calf backgrounding operation north of Strathmore, Alberta. After completing her undergrad at the U of A, she began working with Farm Credit Canada. In her 15 years with FCC, Melissa has worked as a relationship manager, credit manager, and most recently manager business development. She is still active in the cattle industry, helping to operate a cow-calf operation east of Red Deer with her partner, Danny. In her spare time, she enjoys team roping, gardening, and skiing. Tonight, Melissa will be speaking about working with your lender and having a good relationship with your creditor. So with that, I'll hand things over to you, Melissa.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen here and just let me know when that's working. Good to go?
I see it. It looks good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Ellen gave a pretty good intro there. So I'm just going to speak today or tonight a little bit about working with your lender. A little bit about me. Ellen gave a pretty good intro. I run a beef farm. I live on a beef farm right now. And if it wasn't crazy enough that I chase cows around for work, I also chase them around for fun. So I'm getting my full slew of cows. So a little bit, so the agenda and what I want to run through tonight. First, I want to talk about, I'm going to break it into 3 sections. So one, what to prepare before you meet with your lender, what to expect during your meeting with your lender, and then kind of talk about the what if, being what to do if you are declined from your lender. So. Okay, so I put this picture up here. I'm sure everyone has seen Shark Tank or Dragon's Den on TV. If you haven't, basically the gist of it is folks pitch their ideas and inventions in hopes of obtaining capital from a shark, basically to make their dream a reality. So I like to think a little bit in a sense that that is what we do as lenders, hopefully not as an aggressive or intimidating of an environment. But basically what we're doing is partnering with people, providing them capital in the form of loans to grow their business and at the end of the day, really achieve your goals. So the reason I show this slide and I want to talk about it is the key that I always take away from watching this show is I find that the folks that strike a deal, they have an ability to do what they say they're going to do. They know their numbers, and they have a really strong passion for their business. So I think that really resonates well in what we're going to talk about tonight and farming in general. So yeah, so hopefully I can give you a few tips and tricks tonight to help when you're working with your shark back in town. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about before you meet with your lender. And the big thing here is paperwork and the dreaded paperwork. So first off, we got to gather up our tax returns, and financial statements are the big thing. And don't get lost in my pictures here. I just I threw these up here just so you can see what they look like. The big thing is make sure you go through these and understand the numbers that are on them, and that you can articulate and tell the story of what happened in in that year to your lender, especially if your accountant is preparing these for you. Make sure that you know what's going on as well. One thing I do want to touch on is cash versus accrual statements. So the majority of operations that we see run primarily as sole proprietors, and likely that means you're completing a cash return income tax, which you see on the left of the screen. The good news, I don't know any farmers that like paying income tax, and filing on a cash basis means that if there is some extra cash at the end of the year, we usually do those fun things called pre-buys or write-offs. And I don't have time to show the video to you, but if you do have 2 minutes, check out the YouTube Seinfeld and Kramer talk about write-offs. It's actually quite hilarious. So aside from that, besides, the tricky part for lenders though is that this really doesn't bode well when you're trying to show that you want to get some additional debt from us. When you grind that net income down to a zero or close to zero. So the big thing is an accrual statement will basically adjust that revenue to show what actually happened in the year. So quick example there, if this year you decide you're gonna hold your calves or hold some calves because you got a bunch of feed, and normally you would sell them in November, but you're gonna wait till January, an accrual statement will basically show an inventory adjustment that you held those calves. It'll show in your revenue and give a better picture for the year. Okay. Next thing is a net worth statement. So basically this is just a statement of what you own versus what you owe. Most lenders will have some form of a template that you can fill in. The key is to break things out, current things, which are things that can be bought, used, sold in a year, versus the long-term things, which are items that you're going to keep. So think land, buildings, mother cows, and then along with that, current liabilities, which is operating loans, credit cards, versus term liabilities, which is, or current liabilities, which is, current liabilities, sorry. Make sure to put in the details. That's a big thing. The lenders are always going to come back and ask you for those details. And one tip I would have is save a copy of this on your computer somewhere. And once a year, go in and update it so you always have it on hand and you're not having to go back and kind of start from fresh when the lender does ask for this. I always find that the more up-to-date your record keeping is, the easier these things are to complete. Okay, last thing that you may need to prepare for your lender is either a business plan or projection. These are going to be really important if you're new or startup, so you don't have any numbers to go off of from the past, if you are planning a big change, or if there's been some uncertainties or unproven results in the past. So really what you're doing here is you're telling us what you project to earn and what you project to spend going forward. You can also tell us a little bit about how much money you need to do what you want to do and how you're going to do that. I would always say though, don't write a novel. Obviously that's what the meeting with your lender is for. So just think about why does it make sense what I want to do, and how can I tell my story. Okay, so now we're ready to basically meet with our lender. I always say nothing's better than meeting in person, and it's even better to meet at the farm if possible, just to get a feel for your operation. This is a little tricky right now, but we can still be creative, do the Zoom calls if we need to. Obviously in the summer you can meet outside, do things like that. The key here is that a good lender is going to take time to have a good conversation with you. I always, any undersalt is going to learn about your past first. That got you to where you are and what your keys to success are. Ooh, I'm just checking, my internet gave me a bit of a blip. Can you still hear me? Hopefully.
It's better now, yeah.
Okay, I had a little thing come up and said your internet is unstable, good old rural connection. So anyways, sorry. So any lender is going to talk to you about your past. So what got you to where you are, what your keys to success are. They're going to talk about your present, what's working right now, what isn't working, where you're at today, and then your future. So where you want to go from here. So what are your 3 to 5 year plans? What do you need to change to get to where you want to go? And really, they want to do that before they dive into any solutions or a product. I always say nothing is worse than getting a loan or some credit, and then 6 months or a year down the road, realizing that structure doesn't work with your long-term plans, and it kind of handcuffs you. Definitely you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into something. Aside from that, I'm going to ask you some questions about your management. So can you talk to me about your death loss, your weaning rates, your herd health, your feed program, where and when you market your calves, and if and how you manage any risk are kind of some of the main questions that you can expect from your lender. Okay, whoop, go back. So from there, basically, once I've kind of got that background, that history, and know a little bit more, I'm going to start digging into the numbers. And this is where we'll pull out the tax return, we'll pull out the financial statement, and have a little bit of a conversation. So what do I look for when I'm looking at a producer's financials? I really like to keep things simple, or try to keep things simple. And what I've taught my team is to use something, I call it my cowboy math. And so where I start is I really like to talk in units. I think it resonates well with producers when I talk to them about per cow or per wintered cow, per weaned calf, anything like that. Pick a unit that works for you and makes sense. It's an art, not a science, I guess you could say. So for me, I usually use when I'm looking at a lot of cow-calf producers numbers. So the first one I look at is just straight revenue per unit, or revenue per cow. Basically take your calf check, your call check, and divide it by the number of your wintered cows. And that's the number I use. Second one I look at is variable expenses per wintered cow. And really, these are all the costs that are not fixed and vary depending on how many cows you have. So I know Brett talked a little bit about direct costs. I tend to add a little bit more into my variable costs, as I call it. So a lot of things, so the main things are going to be feed, vet, repairs, fuel. Those are some of the big ones, salaries, those type of things. So I do include a bit more of those costs, and then I divide them per cow. I can give you some averages that I usually see kind of in my years of working at Farm Credit. I tend to see this anywhere from $500 to $800 a cow, depending on the producer and what they're doing. The other one I look at, and I usually actually calculate this one first, is payments plus fixed costs per cow. And basically what I put in here is loan payments and fixed costs. I actually put land rent in here as a fixed cost because I think either you buy your land or you rent your land. And I divide that by cow and see where that is to start. I usually see this anywhere tops around $375 a cow, but as I said, it really depends on the producer and what their management style is like. So then I look at these three numbers and say, okay, well, does this seem reasonable when I'm looking at this? Just think, example here, if you sell your calves, if your revenue per unit is $1,200 and your debt payments, number 3, is $1,000, does that make sense to have $200 for all your variable expenses per cow? Probably not. So that's a quick number I'll run with guys, just looking at their numbers. Another quick ratio that I go to is total debt per cow. So instead of payments, I just take, okay, how much debt do you have? And usually anything over $1,500 to $2,000 per cow, I start to think, okay, I got to dig a little deeper to see if this works. So quick example, 200 cows times 200 or times 2,000, anything more than $400,000 worth of debt on that farm, I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. The other thing I like to talk about with producers is living costs. What's left to live after you've paid for all those things? Groceries, kids are expensive, hobbies. I know I like to go enter the odd team roping jackpot, so I got to leave myself some cash for that. The one thing is be reasonable with that. If you don't know what that number is, take a couple months and see, okay, how much do I actually spend on these things? And be realistic when you're sitting down with your lender and what that cost is. We'll have guys that come in and say they only spend $20,000 a year, and ones that are on say they spend $70,000 a year. The key is to be honest as to what that number should look like. So from there, if I need to do more digging, I will. Is there off-farm income if the number doesn't really make sense? I know surface lease revenue plays into a lot of producers' numbers. Another thing is I like to see 3 to 5 years of results. I think the past is always a really good indicator of future performance. I think it generates some conversation. What happened this year? What happened this year? What's going on? And I always say in 5 years of farming, you're probably going to get 1 really good year, 1 really crappy year, and probably 3 average years. So let's try to meet somewhere in the middle there. Okay, from there, then I usually dig into some ratios, and I know sometimes you can get ratio analysis paralysis. So I really have 3 go-tos that I'll share with you guys. First is working capital or liquidity, and that kind of cash is king. So really, this just looks at your operation's ability to pay its short-term debt, so less than 1-year debts and obligations. So quick math, current assets minus current liabilities. I tend to shy away from the ratio, and I actually look at the actual dollar amount that's sitting there. So quick math on this one. Let's say you have $300,000 worth of calves that you're going to sell in December, and you need to pay off $200,000 of operating lines and make some payments in January of $100,000. Probably not the best time to look at expanding. The one thing you might want to do here is really sit down and maybe do a month-to-month cash flow. Cow-calf guys are kind of unique, in a lot of us sometimes only get income once per year, unlike a dairy guy who's getting his money monthly, or a grain farmer who's maybe getting it a few times a year. Sometimes we have to live off that cow check for a whole year. So really sitting down and going through a month to month and saying, okay, how much credit do I need? When do I need it? And how much is a good exercise. The one watch out I have is watch for current assets that you aren't going to sell or make liquid. So for example, feed. I'll often see producers, well, my current assets minus my current liabilities is positive. It looks really good. I have a large number sitting there. And then we end up looking at it and realizing that the majority of that is actually feed that's, say, going to go into your mother cows and isn't going to be converted into liquid cash. So don't overestimate that position. Another quick ratio I always calculate, and super easy, is the debt exposure ratio. And basically this is just gross income, so what you made in the year, divided by your total liabilities. And I like to see, I caution when this number gets lower than 0.4. So if it's lower than 0.4 on here, then I know I have to dig in a little bit more. So quick math for you. So if I have $1 million worth of income and $100,000 worth of debt, that ratio is 10. So quite strong, versus if I have $100,000 worth of income and $1 million worth of debt, that ratio is 0.1, so quite weak. So, and just looking at that, I would say if a producer comes to me and has $100,000 worth of income and $1 million worth of debt, I'm going to start to worry or know I need to dig a little deeper. Okay, and lastly, the big one too is debt to equity. Basically, I want to see this lower than 1 to 1. Anything higher, so 2 to 1, anything higher than the 1 to 1 means you have more debt than equity. So, and I do like to look at this 2 ways. You can look at it at a cost basis. So basically that you value all your assets at what you paid for them, or you can calculate this on a market basis, which is you value all your assets at what they're worth as if you were to sell them today. I like the cost basis that actually tells me how much is from profits going back into your business versus things such as land appreciation. And lastly, your lender is always going to touch on this a little bit, is security. And that's basically the skin that you're putting in the game to your lender. And I'm not going to throw out any ratios here on purpose because where that lands is different for everyone. Okay. So then I'll bring to kind of my last slide, the dreaded decline. Definitely no one wants to hear this. I will say though that we are in the business of lending money, but I do want to stress that no lender, no matter who, wants to put someone in a position where they could lose their farm or inevitably set them up for some type of failure. The one thing I will say though is make sure that you understand the why behind that. Your lender is getting paid to give you rationale for the no and what they need to see from you to turn it into a yes. So realistically, if it is a no, it should be, okay, it's a no, but until you do these things, or I see these things, or these ratios improve, then it will turn into a yes. And that at least gives you something that you can go back and digest, work on, and then hopefully come back and turn it into an approval. So with that, I will end it there. I could probably talk forever on these things. I did have to cut it down, but I'm probably over my time. I never time this, but thanks for having me, and I guess we'll open it up for questions.
So while everyone is taking a moment to type in their questions into the chat or the Q&A area, I'm going to share a short video with you where you'll hear from Brenna from Canfax Research Services, where Brenna is talking about the Canadian cow-calf cost of production network. So just bear with me while I get this loaded up here.
Canfax Research Services, along with the provincial coordinators, are excited to announce the launch of the Canadian cow-calf cost of production network. This will be the first time that cost of production information will be available for every province across Canada, with data collected from British Columbia to Prince Edward Island. By using a standardized methodology, the information will be interpreted the same in each province. In addition, this system will allow for international comparisons to be made with similar production systems in other countries. Historical cost of production benchmarks have been based on provincial or regional averages that are unclear about the type of production systems they represent. This network will provide benchmarks based on ecoregions and production systems clearly outlined. This will allow producers to select the benchmark that makes the most sense for their operation, regardless of provincial boundaries. The network will collect information every 5 years from producers, with annual indexing occurring in between. This will reduce the response burden for producers participating. In addition, that backward indexing will be available for the last 5 years, making historical data available right away for analysis. Producers will also be able to learn from each other and share ideas on how to implement different practices once they leave. The goal of the network is not just to provide benchmarks, but to encourage innovation and pass on knowledge to new producers entering the industry. Participating producers will receive a $500 honorarium, a summary of the baseline data with key performance indicators, that 5 years of historical indexing, and a summary of the future farm scenarios developed utilizing the 5% rule. To participate, go to the Canfax website and click on Research on the top menu bar. Then go to the Sign Up survey on the left menu bar. This short survey will allow us to group producers by similar production systems, such as calving date and weaning date. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your provincial coordinator. They're here to help. We would like to thank our funder, the Beef Cattle Research Council, and the provincial partners who have made the Canadian cow-calf cost of production network possible. Look for more information coming out in September.
Okay. So now we will go into answering some of your questions that you've been entering here over the last hour. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter those into the chat or into the Q&A. The first question here I have for Brett, and it has to do with the heifers. In a perfect world ranch, where is the additional cost of grazing for the 100 bred heifers?
That's okay. Good question. When we talked about that at the start, we talked about how we were separating the cow-calf enterprise from the heifer enterprise. So I'm just going to share my screen again to kind of point that out. Is that all right? Oh, I can't do that while you're sharing. Okay. So because we're looking at just the cow-calf enterprise, there, I'm going to share my screen now.
Yeah, you can share your screen there.
Let's get rid of that. Okay, so in the, sorry, there was somebody saying that they couldn't see this as well, so we're going to zoom it in a bit. So this is just looking at the cow-calf enterprise. We're buying our heifers, replacement heifers, at fair market value, which we're assuming is $2,000. So the replacement heifer enterprise is a completely separate enterprise from this. We're assuming that they're on a separate pasture. They're taking up, they're eating separate grass. They're a completely separate operation. You could have that enterprise on your ranch as well, or you might not. So this is looking at that completely independently from the replacement heifer enterprise. Hopefully that answers your question. You're muted, Ellen.
I'm muted. That's a rookie mistake. You think I'd have that by now. This was another question for you, Brett. If you cut your hay costs, does that come from extending the grazing season, which means having to reduce the cow herd? So longer grazing season, same forage base means fewer cows?
That was one that came up in the chat, right?
Yes, it did. Yep.
Yeah, okay. And that's a really good question. You have to remember that in the every piece of your ranch is connected to another piece in some way, shape, or form. That's how I mentioned in the Perfect World Ranch, they had increased the value of their calves, but to do that, they had to buy more expensive bulls. Or where they decreased their hay cost, they had to increase their supplementation from other supplements. I can't answer that for you for your ranch. You just have to figure that out for yourself. Some of this is using an educated guess and trying it for a year. You know, find out, okay, what does it cost me to, if I decrease my hay, do I have to have more pasture? Do I have to add some more supplements to it? What do I have to change in management, and what does it cost? Some of that is going to just come from experience on your ranch, and some of that can come from field days, talking to other ranchers, other producers that have done something new. There's a pretty strong community network across Canada with some really good ranchers out there. If you look hard enough, you'll find the answer you're looking for.
Perfect. This was another common question for you, Brett, asking if they can get a copy of that Excel sheet that you were presenting from.
Just email me. I don't know if my email's on there, but brett.mcrae@icloud.com. You can find me Facebook, Twitter. Send email me at that email address. You can find me, and I'll get it into your hands somehow.
Perfect. Melissa, if producers were wanting to get to a good point of being able to approach a creditor, what's some ways that they could get themselves organized before they're going to go into a chat with their lender?
Okay. I can't start my video. It won't let me, but hopefully you can hear me. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I muted myself.
Okay,
again.
perfect.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would say the one thing to be prepared is to gather up those financials that I talked about. So your tax returns, your net worth, have those handy, bring them with you if you can to the meeting. Run through some of those ratios that I went through yourself. Always the big thing I say is, does it make sense and why does it make sense to you? And then can you tell that story to your lender? And that's what they're going to be looking for. Lots of times I've been on farm and I'll have looked at the numbers and I'll think, man, this doesn't really make sense, or I'm not sure if this is going to work, until I get out to the farm and I sit with the producer, hear their story, what they're doing. Okay, I do this. Everyone does everything a little bit differently, right? So there's no way that I can say your ratio must be this, because I know some guys who can run a little tighter and some that can't at all, right? And they're in a good discussion and being open with them, because then that's how they're going to create the best solution for you. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. Another question for you, Melissa. How would you deal with a high rate of banker turnover on your accounts?
Yeah, I think that is inevitable a little bit in the industry. I can only speak for Farm Credit. I've worked here for 15 years of all my working life. Usually people do go on to new roles, or they want to try new things. It's just kind of a fact of life, if you will. I know different banks try different things. What we do from credit now is we do realize that that's a story to another lender again. Like, geez, I just did this last year, right? So what we've been working on doing is taking really good notes, having really good customer files, so that if Melissa gets hit by a bus today, Jane can pick up the file and know exactly where I left off. So I know it is a pain point for producers. It's a pain point for myself when I have to explain my story multiple times. But I know that is something we're working on. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I think just the fact that we do realize that it is a pain point.
Question for Brett. Brett, what percentage of your time do you spend on this acronym, WOTB versus WITB? Brett's laughing.
That's a good question, Aaron. You paid attention at the Ranching for Profit School. For those who don't know, WOTB versus WITB, WOTB is working on the business versus WITB is working in the business. It's a Ranching for Profit term they use quite a bit. What they're saying there is working in the business is doing your daily work, feeding cows, fixing fence, doing chores, all the stuff that everybody does day to day that we're really, really good at doing. They're the jobs that are easy to do because we like doing them. We like branding, we like processing cows, we like doing all that stuff. Nobody likes doing their numbers. It's hard work. Working on the business is doing the hard work of not even so much just filling out your financial forms and doing your taxes. That's still working in the business. Working on the business is doing your projections for next year, projecting your cash flow for the next year, doing your gross margin analysis for each enterprise, putting together your business plan for your lender, putting together your growth and expansion plan or your succession plan for the next few years. It's the hard work that is easy to do, and it's really easy not to do or to push off till tomorrow. I would like to say that I stick with the 80-20 rule in this. I probably don't. I know when I took Ranching for Profit, their big recommendation was take 2 mornings per week to work on the business rather than in the business. I generally do that in the off season, in the summer, in the heat of busy season when it's really good weather. That doesn't happen. It's a little easier to do it in January when it's -40 outside. It's a little easier to sit in the office then. but it's doing the hard work of working on your business, not just working in it all the time. Good question, Aaron.
I think a suitable answer too, Brett. So I think we will end it there for questions. So just a couple more things before we let you go. One is how to get more information and science-based production advice through the BCRC. You can go to our website, www.beefresearch.ca, and click on the subscribe button to sign up for our free email list. If you've got a Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube account, you can connect with us there. Our next webinar is Reproductive Failure in the Beef Herd, Causes, Effects, and When to Intervene, where we will be joined by a panel of veterinarians from across Canada. And that will be on December 2nd at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. You'll receive an email from me in a couple of days with a link to watch this webinar recording, as well as some links to additional information on financial tools. You'll also receive a link to a survey. If you can take a few minutes of your time to fill out this survey, it's very helpful for us when we're planning future webinars. So I think that is it for us tonight. Thank you at home for joining us. And on behalf of everyone at the BCRC, thank you to Brett and Melissa and Brenna for volunteering your time and expertise with us. And good night.